Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here as we kick off the Global Open Education Week. This presentation is our kickoff here at Montgomery College, and as many of you know, this week is a wonderful celebration of the core values of social justice by way of open education. So here at MC, we might know some of this work in the context of open educational resources. You might know the acronym OERs, which are free and openly licensed course materials. But this work is way more than just about having free materials. It's truly about social justice. It's about equity. It's about inclusion. It's really about transformation. And so before we get started, I wanted you to know that this presentation is designed to be interactive. So there will be some opportunities for you to chime in through some polling questions, all right? I also want to share that my Twitter handle is written at the bottom right of the slide. So it is at Prof. Hernandez 2 as in the number 2. So for any of you who are on Twitter, if you're interested in tweeting this out live, please go right ahead. Now, to get yourself ready for the interactive component of this presentation, I'm going to ask that you visit the Mentimeter website, which is written at the top there. It's www.menti.com. And once you're on the site, you will enter this code, also written at the top, 70887749. All right. The presentation slides should pop up on your device at this point. If you're unable to access the Mentimeter site to do the polling, that's okay too. If you can also provide your comments and responses to my questions in the chat if you're comfortable doing it that way. Okay. And we will monitor the chat as we go along. So feel free to use the chat for ideas, sharing comments, sharing questions, and I will get to that at the end of the presentation. All right. So in the spirit of inclusivity, as is one of the values of open education, it is very important to me, as well as to so many of us in higher ed, that we should honor the original inhabitants of our land. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Piscataway people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we reside here in Maryland. And for anyone outside of Maryland viewing this presentation, please know that I acknowledge your original inhabitants as well. Now, to give you a sense of what you're hearing this morning, let me give you a quick rundown of what I'm going to cover today. First, I want to get to know you, and for us to get to know each other, really, through those polling questions. This is where the Mentimeter comes in. Then I want to share a little bit about Montgomery College. Even if you work here, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want you to see why the work we do in open education is relevant to Montgomery College, relevant to those residents of Montgomery County and our surrounding communities and neighborhoods. And then I'm going to talk about the urgency of moving toward the world of open. I'll talk about the open education and open pedagogy conceptual framework. And I'll also talk about the framework around decolonization as well. You'll also get to hear about some opportunities for advancing the work here, as well as for any of you who are not from Montgomery College. And then I'll share some examples from MC to give you a sense of what we're already doing and what potentially what direction we may be going in the future. Okay, so let's get that Menti mindset ready, because I have some questions that I want to share with you. Oops. I don't know what's going on here, but all right, there you go. The first question that I'd like you to answer is, what is your official role at your institution? And for those of you who are just chiming in, please go to the Menti website and then use that code that's written at the top there, 70887749. All right. And if for those of you who are saying other, I apologize, there were only so many categories I could put on here. But if you want to share what your other is in the chat. Feel free to do that as well. So we have librarians, full-time faculty members, instructional designers, senior administrators, staff, coordinator. All right, I think we are dying down here. Great, thank you for sharing. Now, the next question I have for you is, what is your level of knowledge on open education? Are we looking at no knowledge at all, some basic knowledge, intermediate, or advanced? Okay. Okay, so quite almost an even mix here of basic, intermediate just popped up, advanced. All right, a third, and a third. Well, you've come to the right place no matter what your level of knowledge on open education is, because I think if you're advanced, you can certainly get refreshers or some ideas on how to advance some of the work you're doing. If you're basic, you've come to the right place. This is a place where you can certainly gain more knowledge about open education. All right, now, next question for you. What words come to mind when you hear open education? Give you a minute to think about that. What words come to mind when you hear open education? Okay, free, accessible, engagement, free again, yeah, equity, awesome, 5 R's, decommodifying knowledge, fully available. Oh, education is open to anyone, unrestricted. Books, no expense. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Next question. What words come to mind when you hear equity and inclusion? Equity and inclusion. Righting wrongs. Okay. That's very deep. Voices heard. Everybody's included, right? All views explored and treated equally. Helping students, faculty, staff feel seen in the materials among their peers. All right. Easy to say, harder to do. Okay, accessible, level the playing field. Wonderful, good. I appreciate all of these responses here. Now, one more before we take a pause on the polling. Share what you have done in either the open education space or the equity and inclusion space. And for many of you who have done so much, feel free to just highlight a couple. Training. Talk to students, spread the message, different presentations, develop the curricula, a member of an OER team at a previous workplace. Working on faculty development, DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Very nice. Good. All right. Library holdings versus e-courses, very important, absolutely. Right, no low-cost class resources, redeveloped your curriculum using OERs. Member of a work group for Equality Matters with that diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging emphasis. different types of assessments, spreading the word, exactly. One of the best forms of advertisement, a member of PACE on the Equity and Inclusion Office. Terrific. All right. I will continue the slides, but feel free to continue contributing to this particular question on the chat if you'd like. These are really great ways for us to see what you're doing, whether at Montgomery College, if you're not from Montgomery College, at your institution. It also generates ideas for the rest of us in terms of what else can we do in these two spaces. Okay, great. So now that we have gotten a chance to know each other quite a bit, and we've gotten a chance to get some ideas from one another, I want to share with you why we do this work at Montgomery College, why it's so important and it's so relevant. And again, even if you work here, you'll see why I'm giving you these fun facts about MC. So many of us know that Montgomery College is located in Montgomery County, Maryland. We're right outside of Washington, D.C. We consider ourselves suburban urban in our communities. We're an open access community college. We've got 4 main campuses: Rockville, Germantown, Tacoma, and we've just launched the virtual campus, or launching the virtual campus. We have about 54,000 credit and non-credit students every year, 21,000 online enrollments every year. We're recognized as, first of all, Montgomery County is one of the most diverse counties in America. And Montgomery College just 2 years ago was recognized as the #1 most diverse community college in the continental United States. We're the largest community college in the state of Maryland. So really when I'm sharing with you these fun facts, it's to say that with our size, with our diversity, with the different walks of life that we have on all of our campuses, on campus and virtual, the work of open education is extremely critical to help all of our students advance, to help them give them equitable opportunities to succeed. Okay, so I'd like to share with you this slide, this image, and I know that many of you have seen this before, especially if you've been in my presentations, but I think many of you have seen just the first 3 columns. That 4th column on the far right is the latest iteration of this. And I want you to spend a minute or two reflecting on what you see here. Then when you're ready, put in the chat just 1 or 2 brief phrases of what you see. 1 or 2 brief phrases of what you see in the chat. Removal of barriers, you see a process. Level structure. While the rest of you think about this, I'm going to just briefly describe what we do see here. So we see on the far left what many of us would consider reality, where there is an uneven and inequitable distribution of resources. And these 3 individuals with various backgrounds, whether noticeable or hidden, are not necessarily getting that level playing field that someone had mentioned in the chat. And then you see the difference between equality and equity, right? Equality means equal, which means the same distribution of resources. But yet with the same distribution of resources, we don't see everyone being able to participate. And in this case, the participation is watching the baseball game. Equity means that we provide the resources that are needed for each individual based on their individual needs so that they can participate in watching the baseball field. And then someone mentioned removal of barriers at the far right, which is essentially where we want to go. Somebody also mentioned a process. This is a process. We eventually want to be at a place where we are liberated, people are liberated, so that obstruction, so they can view whatever it is they need to view to really see what's truly going on. Now, no one has yet mentioned this, but you see all the people in the audience, right, who are sitting, but then you see these 3 people standing. And so when I've shared this before, someone had mentioned in the past, True liberation is those three people also sitting where everybody else is so that they're fully integrated with everyone else. So who knows if there's going to be a fifth image in the next iteration of this particular illustration. So I wanted to share with you the notion of open and social justice in this context. Okay. Now, because of the varying degrees of knowledge that each of you in this Zoom space have, I thought it would be appropriate to level the field for, has been mentioned before, by laying out what the different phrases mean. So I've created this diagram that I hope will offer some clarity for any of you who might need it. And as you can see at the top there is open education. And this is really the actual teaching and learning framework that is centered on making education more accessible, more affordable, more equitable, more inclusive, more innovative, and creates more opportunities for our students to succeed. So essentially the work that we do, all of us do in the world of open should touch on all of these values. All right, then in the middle of the diagram, we have open pedagogy. And these are the teaching and learning strategies by which educators meet those parameters that I laid out at the top there. And some strategies might include redesigning your curriculum, which someone had mentioned when I asked, what do you do in this space? You redesign your curriculum to be more inclusive. Another strategy could be to enhance student engagement, to allow for greater opportunities so that students have access to the course, that they're motivated, that they're able to participate. You can also incorporate alternative assessments to be more equitable as we test our students' subject mastery. We can also utilize emerging technologies to be more innovative and help our students advance in their spaces instead of a hindrance to learning. And then at the bottom, what I have on the diagram is our open educational resources, OERs. And I put them at the bottom on purpose because they really symbolize the efforts that are delivered at the ground level and on the front line. So some of the examples of OERs, as I've listed there, can include an inclusive syllabus, open textbooks, renewable assignments, and the list really goes on. If it's openly licensed, it's free for all to adopt and adapt, then it is an OER. Okay, so I hope that this framework helps as I now talk about the urgency of this work. So we all know college has gotten very expensive, and much more so in the last several years. And even at community colleges where it's a bit more affordable, still for many of our students, tuition can still break the bank. Then you add the costs of textbooks and then other related educational expenses, and it becomes quite the situation for our students. In fact, college has increased about 25% in the last decade, right? Because of the opportunity to provide high quality, openly licensed, free course materials to our students. And then in addition to rising tuition, we see college graduates, we've got such a really advancing labor market that is always evolving. Going back to some national data, I found the median time to complete a bachelor's degree is about 52 months, which is just a little bit over 4 years. And then national data also show us that the time to completion at community colleges, it can take up to 6 years on average for some students. Now this is on average. So of course there are some students who take longer than that and some students who take less than that. And so the way that open education can help is to make course materials free, as many of you have mentioned, to make course materials accessible, and make more education or make their overall education more accessible as well. And then they can reduce their time to completion. We can also understand that there's been some significant declining national student enrollment across the board. We've noticed it here at Montgomery College. We're noticing it nationwide. We see big drops in public 4-year institutions. We see drops in 2-year institutions. And some of that drop is really correlated with the pandemic, but it's also correlated with rising tuition costs and the inability to access their college education holistically. And if those are all the cases, then they may be less inclined to enroll in college altogether. So that's another reason why we need open education. It's to make college more affordable and accessible. We also see lower student success rates as a contributing factor to a delayed time to completion. If students are failing or not passing their classes, whether the reason is because something on their end is preventing it, or they just simply couldn't afford the course materials because it's too much, or they just kept falling behind, they're less likely to graduate. And again, all the more reason why we need open education. And then down to our last two reasons. We know that the country has been experiencing a lot lately. Our students have been experiencing a lot lately. They've been rocked by social, political, civil unrests. And then on top of that, we're thrown into a global pandemic that has disrupted so much of our education system, from childcare to kindergarten to college to graduate school even. So Open Education Week is just an absolutely wonderful time to celebrate, but also a time where we need to further increase awareness of this work to help our students navigate some treacherous waters in their higher ed experience. I'm going to hold off on the word decolonizing for a bit because I will share with you the definition of that and how that's related, but I want to stick with open pedagogy a little longer. So here I'm sharing with you why open pedagogy is important, in addition to many of the things that we've already talked about. But I'm going to talk about this now in the context of four things: access, engagement, collaboration, and success. So when we practice open pedagogy, what we're doing is we're increasing access to education, right? First of all, students don't have to wait until their paycheck comes in before purchasing their textbooks. The course materials are freely distributed, openly licensed. This also means we give equitable access to education instead of allowing only those with money to learn and shutting out those without money to not have the same experiences. And then when we practice open pedagogy, we also increase student engagement. Our students become empowered in their learning environments, in their learning process, because of the innovative and the socially just practices that we all incorporate or help to incorporate into the classrooms, whether on campus or virtual. So for example, open educational resources that enable us to decolonize the course curriculum. What that does, it helps us to include everyone's voices rather than just highlighting the dominant few. The third element I want to touch on is collaboration. Open pedagogy means that we're inviting students to be a part of the teaching process. We partner with students so that we all can create course materials that are high quality and highly inclusive. We also partner with colleagues too, to expand our communities of practice. And we can build off one another's wealth of knowledge in a way that is free, that is open, without having to worry about the copyright restrictions that often can be found in a proprietary textbook. And then lastly, success, right? I think that's the reason why so many of us go into higher ed, is to see our students succeed. And when students engage in open pedagogy, not only are we able to help them afford their college education, but they can persist and proceed in a timely fashion, which means they decrease the cost of completion and they decrease the time to completion. And all of this helps us as educators to create a holistic, student-centered approach to education for all of our students. I want to share with you who benefits from open pedagogy. So I think it was from what I've mentioned already, students are benefiting, but also faculty and staff. They benefit because we help to create these transformational learning environments for our students. We help one another find ways to increase student engagement that is appropriate, to help increase student motivation, and ultimately student success. And then when we all succeed in that sense and we all benefit, then the institutions also benefit. And when they support open pedagogy, these are often the institutions that are willing to take risks in innovation and equity-minded approaches to their environments. And therefore, more resources are allocated and we dedicate an infrastructure to the work. And then policymakers and researchers, I'll talk about those as together, but also other decision makers. They benefit because when they see something is working, that it could be correlated with decreased cost of completion and decreased time to completion, we're more likely to pass policies and practices that will help support the work in this space. A really good example is one that just happened recently. Many of you probably are aware of this, but if not, so January of this year, the US Department of Education put out a call for proposals because it was willing to provide some of their HERF money, which is the Higher Ed Emergency Relief Fund, as a result of the pandemic, provide some money to higher ed institutions that want to create OER platforms to help meet the basic needs of students. So that's a really good and very recent example of how policymakers and researchers can benefit from open pedagogy as well. Okay. Now I'm going to get to decolonization. You see through the slides I've just presented how open education and open pedagogy can help increase equity and inclusion and opportunity. So now I'm going to shift a little bit over to decolonization. So the word decolonizing means that we are challenging what we've known for decades, maybe even for centuries. And when it comes to higher ed, we're challenging what we've learned and what we've been taught. So all those years, the way we've been taught, we're now challenging them. So we're shifting the paradigm from excluding a ton of cultures from the conversation and from the work to now including marginalized populations and cultures and including different ways of doing and thinking, learning and teaching. We're reevaluating the way we were taught and how we've been teaching. So we do this by incorporating inclusive approaches in the different avenues of higher ed, like curriculum redesign, I go back to that, to the different types of committee work that is out there, and even down to the way we promote, the way we hire, the way we retain our employees. We are able to decolonize higher ed in all those different capacities. So it's not just about the curriculum, but there are other components of higher ed that need to be reassessed. I want to share this statement with you. It's a statement we've shared in spaces when we presented on decolonizing before. And it's by Nigerian American feminist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'm going to read the statement out loud, and then I'm going to ask you to reflect. And when you're reflecting, I'd like for you to share in the chat what the statement means to you. Okay? Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. When we reject the single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. Take a minute to reflect. And if you're comfortable, you can put in chat what that just did to you or what it means to you. Alex says, every story is part of the World Library of Experiences in Education. Oh, I love that phrase, World Library of Experiences in Education. Thank you. Every learner comes with a story. We should create space in our teaching to hear all stories. We need to listen to all voices. Everyone's story is important and valuable. I find storytelling to be such an effective and emotive way to teach, and it's equally off-putting when the stories used don't reflect your lived experience. Thank you, Elizabeth. Representation matters, right? It matters for our students. It matters for all of us, which is why it's so important to know that decolonizing higher ed is not just about decolonizing what happens inside the classroom. It's to decolonize what also happens in our workspaces. Very good. Feel free to continue putting in chat. Yeah, so Mike says he's reminded of the work of Ursula Pike, who focuses on OE origin, why people got into this work and how their story frames their perspective. And Ursula Pike, well known in the open education field, just did this study where she interviewed several women who are engaged in OER work, myself included. So I was honored to be a part of that work, but really to say, thinking about why she went into this work, Ursula Pike, it's because she saw a lack of diversity in the OER space, in the OER contribution space as well. So everyone has a story. Feel free to continue putting into the chat your thoughts about the statement from Chimamanda, but I will just continue to the next slide, and I want to talk a bit about what's going on here at Montgomery College. And some of you have participated or are participating in some of this work. So now that we have covered the broader concepts of open education and decolonization, I'd like to show you what we've done here at Montgomery College. So here's the journey that we've taken here at MC. You can see that at the beginning of our journey, it really started with Z courses. For those of you who might not know Z, it's zero cost textbook courses, meaning these are courses instructors teach in which the course materials, whether it's a textbook or any other course materials, are free to the students. And since we've been doing this work, we've been able to save more than $9 million for our students. And that's amazing for our students because they can use the money saved for tuition for the next semester or tuition for a second class, living expenses, gas, utilities, other bills they have to pay, food. So it's really nice to be able to do that for our students. But as you can see along the journey, though, we started with the idea of affordability because it came out of a student governance council expression that they were worried about these high textbook costs. But then you can see how we've moved on this journey to social justice, an even deeper angle of social justice. Okay, so I'll get to those two in just a second, but I want to share with you the list of Z degrees and Z certificates that we have. We have 5 Z degrees and 1 Z certificate, which is data science at the bottom. And we have so many Z courses. Last fall of 2021, we offered 566 Z course sections, which had about over 10,600 enrollments. So we're really proud that to say that we can offer our students these high quality courses, high quality options. They can access their education without that financial burden or obstacle that typically comes in the form of expensive textbooks. So even if a textbook is what we might consider only $70, it can still be a hurdle for our students. And that hurdle has likely been exacerbated during the pandemic. I want to share with you that college affordability is certainly important, but so is the impact of open education. Because as educators, we want to know how are our students doing in these courses. And so we pulled up some data that measures fall to fall to fall or compares fall to fall to fall student success rates. These are ABC rates. And there are a lot of numbers here, but this really is to show you that the success rates for some of our demographics in the Z courses are at or above the success rates of those in the non-Z. And a lot of these percentages are comparable. So again, we're really able to confirm that Z courses were in fact beneficial. And so because of those benefits, we took this open pedagogy journey on another level. So I want to share now work that some of the programs that we have here at Montgomery College. Now, this is the higher level of social justice that is that end part of our journey. We wanted to approach open education in a way that directly impacted our communities, but also got our students to be agents of change. So one of the programs that I'm going to highlight for you today is this United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Open Pedagogy Faculty Fellowship. I know that's long. But so several years ago, back in 2017, my colleague, Dr. Mike Mills, and I created this program after we came back from an open ed conference in Anaheim. And after some discussions, after some research, we realized that the United Nations work and the open pedagogy work, there was not anything in the world like it. And so we created this program that initially started at Montgomery College in 2018 and has now, we're now in year 5, and we have a total of 9 2-year and 4-year institutions across North and Central America and the Caribbean. And there are many more institutions who are interested in joining us. And so really the emphasis on this is that these faculty teams are paired up across discipline and across institution. They create OERs, renewable assignments. If you remember that conceptual framework diagram I shared with you, they create these interdisciplinary renewable assignments. They deploy it in their classes, and then their students become their agents of change in the communities, targeting one of these United Nations goals. And in fact, we had put out a call just recently for applications. And so if faculty are interested, please apply. The deadline for Montgomery College is March 31st by midnight. And we will have info sessions along the way. So please take a look at which info session you can join and be a part of this great work. And I also wanted to say that we were awarded the Open Pedagogy Award for Excellence by Open Education Global. And this is really humbling for me because I get to work with the faculty and the students who made this recognition possible. This recognition is for them. The other program I want to mention is a brand new program. It's called the Social Justice Ambassadors Program. Another good example of the intersection of open education and decolonization. And we are working together. The leadership team is college-wide, it's cross-functional. Basically, these pairs are students and faculty, and they work together to create and redesign their curriculum so as to include materials that are more inclusive and equity-minded. So some examples could be more inclusive open educational resources, an inclusive syllabus, increased enhancement of their assessments, group activities that really put the student voices front and center of their learning process of the course curriculum. And so this particular program, we are going to have our first showcase at the end of this semester. So we're going to get a chance to all of us see together what work they produced all semester long. Okay. The next thing I want to show you is not necessarily related to open pedagogy per se, but it is related to social justice. And I want to share with you that colleague Christine Crefton is the one at Montgomery College who leads these efforts. And she has done such great work related to badging and microcredentials related to social justice. The image that you see on the left is really just to show you what it looks like here at Montgomery College, what a badge Montgomery College. And for those of you who may not know about badging, essentially it's a subset of microcredentials, and essentially it's a digital award that's given to a person for achieving a set of skills or competencies. And then microcredentials is the larger umbrella of those individual badges. What you see on the right side of the screen are some of the badges that Christine has worked with faculty and staff across Montgomery College that are related to social justice. And the badges are predominantly distributed to students, but faculty and staff have also received this as well. And I'm happy to share that Christine is leading the efforts to develop an OER microcredential that will consist of 3 individual badges. So I'm really, really excited about this work. Now, many of you are probably thinking, for those of you who are not necessarily involved heavily in open education work at Montgomery College, if you're not from MC, maybe at your institution, but here are just some ways in which you can get involved, or ways in which we can advance the work of open education at our respective institutions, okay? This is in no particular order, so I'm really just going to list it the way it's been listed in my slide. One way to advance the work is to have the open education work be aligned with the institutional strategic plan and the goals of the institution. So what you see here is the various strategic plans we have at Montgomery College. We have the Middle State Self-Study Report, the Achieving the Dream Student Success Vision, the Academic Affairs Master Plan, which is that colorful wheel at the bottom, we have found that when the work is aligned with the various documents and the various goals, you are more likely to receive support, more likely to receive service resources, more likely to be able to get the work launched and off the ground running in a much more seamless way. And it can create, when pretty much everyone is involved, you can create opportunities for college-wide transformation. The other way to do it is to have a formal infrastructure at the institution. So at Montgomery College, through the Achieving the Dream grant that we had several years ago, we were able to create MC Open. And this allows us to share the open education work a bit more easily across our institution, provide the relevant training for faculty and staff, and also encourage networking in this space so that we can expand communities of practice. I go back to the importance of working together to create this type of support system at the institution. So in the spirit of collaboration, there are other ways that you can advance the work of open education, and that is through internal collaboration. So what you see here is we at Montgomery College have involved many of these players at our institution. In the open education space, librarians, institutional leaders, instructional designers, the grants office. We've even involved students, full-time faculty members, part-time faculty members, community members, and so many more. The thought behind this is if you can bridge boundaries, if you can connect with the various offices within the institution, you're more likely to be able to create that holistic environment for your students, and therefore their success and their experiences in education can be a lot more positive. And everyone can be a leader from where they sit. It is not about any particular official title. It is finding a way to connect with one another who do the work and then leveraging it at your institution. External collaboration is also key. So what you see here in front of you are just some of the institutions Montgomery College has partnered with to help in the open education space. So we're in Achieving the Dream schools, so we have that network at our disposal. We participate in the Open Education Conference every year, Open Education Global and Community College Consortium for OER. We partner with them, do a lot of work with them. And in fact, Mike Mills and I are on the executive council of the CCC OER board. So certainly Montgomery College's voice gets heard there. And then of course, social media. We often tweet, we often put on Facebook, LinkedIn, a lot of the different social media outlets to share the work. And in fact, that's how you can expand your community of practice. A lot of times it is really going above and beyond your institution or your local proximity and looking at what people in the country are doing, what people in the world are doing. And social media can certainly help you there. This next one, this is the last one that I will say in terms of getting involvement or getting involved. This is the same data that I shared earlier, but the reason why I put this again here is really just to say that if you can find your data, relevant data that pertains to you in the open education space, go out and share it. Share the work, show people what's happening and share them about the successes. Because when you can do that, people will begin to see, oh, okay, so this is what's happening, this is what's working. But I also encourage you to not just share numerical data, also share the stories behind the data. The qualitative data are also important. And then over time, you'll receive the support that's necessary to help you in your space. And you'll be able to scale and sustain the open education work. Okay. I bring you to my last couple of polling questions. I'm going to ask you to go back to Mentimeter. And for those of you just chiming in, it's menti.com. The code is 70887749. And so the question I'm going to ask you today now is, how do we become transformative? Persevere. Collaborate. Engage. Measure results. create spaces where all can be included and engaged. Innovate. Hear all voices. Examine traditions, yes. Shine a light on all aspects of the college, not just those volunteering to take part in open. Absolutely. In the spirit of collaboration and sharing. All right. Well, keep them coming. Thank you for your responses to that question. I'm going to ask you another one. So many of you know that this is Open Education Week, and so here at Montgomery College, we're kicking it off with this presentation. What do you anticipate doing in the open education space after Open Ed Week is over on Friday? Finally finishing my OER, okay. Continue to focus on important work that mutually benefits students in school. Wonderful. Continue to emphasize OER's importance, yeah. Continue work in editing coursework, revising Blackboard sites, continue to revise assessments. I appreciate that we're continuing to do the work, which is simple, implies that we're already doing this work. And for those of you who are brand new to this work, we can certainly chat about ways in which you can start the work. Work on developing open learning objects for library instructions, yes. Keep those answers coming. So I hope that throughout this week, as you engage in all the global activities and events that are happening in open education, reflect on the opportunities that lie before you. Connect with one another, learn from one another, be open to innovation. Reflect on what this week-long events mean to you and what the community means to you. I really ask you to reflect on your purpose in higher ed. So on that note, we are doing something really neat this year for Open Ed. Dr. Paul Miller, who is our professional development director, has created these digital stickers, which you will receive to show your attendance at our events this week. What you'll do is you'll need to fill out the Microsoft forms to receive the digital sticker. And then you can possibly win an MC Open t-shirt, and you can go to this link, or you can scan that QR code, and it should lead you to the digital sticker form. So on that note, I open it up to questions, if there are any. And while we do the Q&A, before you go, I have one more slide to share with you, which is a survey. So please don't go until I share that.
Shinta,
yeah.
Quick question on the decolonization work. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of faculty and students working together to help decolonize not only the curriculum, but the other aspects of higher education?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because as we all know, those of us who have been in higher ed for a long time and those of us who went to school for a long time, we know that this is not a traditional situation, right? Typically, faculty and students don't necessarily work together in these spaces in leading efforts that are in higher ed. And so, first of all, the programs themselves really generate a lot of enthusiasm and energy and excitement because this is new territory for so many of the students and faculty involved in our programs, like the Social Justice Ambassadors Program, where the faculty and the students work together to redesign the course curriculum. And so it's neat in that way. It's innovative in that way for them. But it also makes us remember how important and how transformational and evolutionary that education is. The way that we were taught so many years ago is not the way that perhaps is successful today. The things that we used to do in higher ed, even 10 years ago at Montgomery College or at any of your institutions, may not necessarily be the way it should go moving forward. And so hearing our students who are all very, very bright and just have a lot of ideas, to hear their fresh ideas and how higher education should evolve is really a treat for so many who are in the program. It really puts the students' voices at the front and center. And thank you, Mike, for putting in the chat. I will also articulate that Mike and I are hosting a Twitter Space conversation this afternoon at 2 p.m. on all things OER, and Mike has put the Twitter link to allow you to just click on it and log on at 2 p.m. to hear us chat about OER. I will now share the survey link for you. We're always wanting to know how things are because we continue to do these types of presentations. There will be future Open Ed weeks to come, so we want to know how things went. And so please take your time to take the survey, whether you go through the link or scan the QR code. Thank you all for coming to this kickoff presentation and for joining us during Open Ed Week at Montgomery College.